I'm Dan Drake. This is Front Up on Visitor Network TV and Channel 99. Our guest is Dr. Matthew Mulcahy, who's here in his capacity as chairman of the Finance Committee of the town of Nantucket. Matt, welcome.
Thank you, Dan.
Great to have you here.
Nice to see you. Usually we're always doing business, so
That's
it's nice
right.
to
This is a form of business.
Well, kind of. It's more informal, I like to think.
But I thought it would be a good idea to have you on to talk about a little bit about the process of how things get to town meeting.
Okay, sure.
But more importantly, to talk about some of the challenges that the Finance Committee is seeing.
Okay.
And some of the issues such as tax rates and so forth that have to be on your mind as you go through this process.
That's correct. They always.
But let's start with the process per se.
Sure. The process, the Finance Committee is a 9-member committee appointed by the selectmen for 3-year terms, and the primary responsibility is to make recommendations for articles for town meeting. And the process comes in early on in the late summer when the budget is formulated by town administration, and that is a process that the Finance Committee is on the periphery, but it observes and takes into consideration the changes. And then in the fall, citizen warrant articles can be submitted, which requires 10 signatures for any initiative that a citizen may feel. And then after that time, and that around Thanksgiving or so, then the process really for the committee takes shape, where we'll start meeting regularly and to discuss 2 things. 1, the department budgets, and 2, all the warrant articles before us. So for up till now, we've been hearing department presentations for the budget, and various citizens have presented their articles in a public hearing.
And some of these articles are not strictly finance related.
That's correct. They're not.
But they're part of your charge nonetheless.
That's actually a very good point, because the Finance Committee is the Finance Committee and deals with finances, but there's really no other mechanism for public transparency for airing warrant articles. And so it's over the years.
Other than the zoning ones, which
Oh,
are
excuse me,
separate,
yes, I'm sorry. Yes, I should take that. Yes, zoning had the planning board. That's a whole different animal. The planning board submits zoning articles. They also deal with citizen warrant articles for zoning too. That the Finance Committee tries not to get involved in, because again, we're not certainly not planners and not trying to pretend to be. But as you mentioned before, there are other non-financial articles that really don't have a forum, so they naturally fall on the Finance Committee. An example this year, one that comes to mind, is a gentleman who is sponsoring an article to ban the sale of balloons on the island for ecology and environmental purposes. And I mean, there's not a direct financial implication on that, but we as a committee will give a recommendation to recommend this or not. And without the Finance Committee taking a charge, then it would just go to town meeting blank. So
I suspect some of these issues provoke the most debate.
Some do. Some do. Well, we can talk about those. Some do. And some we've already, because the process is dragged out for a few months, we've tried to deal with some of these, and it's the citizen warrant articles in particular, deal with them early on, so that everybody has their say and they can and their chance to voice up. So some of them we've already completed, maybe about 10% of the warrant. But getting back to the process, so we've heard the budget, various town departments and the budgets, including enterprise funds, come and explain their budgets for the coming year, and questions are asked, and we've done that, our statutory duty, I guess you can say it. And now the next week we'll have our public hearing, which gives an opportunity for any individual to come in and express their opinions on any of the warrant, including zoning, even though we try to shy that away to the planning. And then after next week, then we get down and earnestly start making recommendations on the warrant. And so when we make our recommendations, we will, the warrant goes to print with our recommendations and comments in there, and the Board of Selectmen may have comments on articles, and the Planning Board will make recommendations on zoning articles, and that's what is in the newspaper or is available for the public, that as a town meeting. And then if someone disagrees with the Finance Committee position or Planning Board position, then they get an opportunity to call the article, and the debate begins on town meeting floor.
But the process of what is voted on at town meeting is really not it's not really the article.
It's the motion.
It's the motion by the Finance Committee or the Planning Board.
That's correct.
Excuse me.
That's correct.
To adopt or not adopt it.
To adopt or not.
And then, so if it's going to be amended, that's
That's
what
on
has
town
to be
meeting floor.
amended rather than correct.
That's absolutely correct. Yes.
Okay. Let's talk about some of the big issues that
Sure.
are out there this year.
There are a few. Some years more than others. The big issues that come to mind that the committee is just getting to tackling is the capital projects coming on. A new school,
Right.
and a refurbishment of the middle school, and the new fire station, and so they will be voted on by the committee, and a recommendation, yay or nay, and neither has been given yet, and then go to town meeting, and it'll be for a debt exclusion article to.
Have you any idea yet what impact those projects would have on somebody's tax bill?
You know,
I mean, if you don't, that's fine.
Well, I can give you generalized. The reason I have to think about it, but we try to. That's a question that the finance director and I, Brian Turbot, new finance director, who, by the way, is doing an excellent job, have been going back and forth on. Is that the number that we want to present, or that should be presented out there? Want to be sure that it's understandable, and frankly, and I have to take a step back. I'm not really a finance guy, so when I hear all these numbers on a page, it always it makes my eyes turn red. And so we'd like to break it down into, if your house is assessed at $1 million, what's the effect for 20 years for each? For the school, in general answers, it's anywhere from $150 to $185 per year per $1 million house. And I say that because I think it's generalized, but there's a little bit of caution too, because initially with interest rates can vary, and you can take out short-term borrowing because it's a long-term. Then it starts getting complicated,
Right.
which influences the actual impact on the taxpayer.
Right.
So the school, but the answer I gave is a general answer, and so I don't think it's any more than that. The fire station is, since if you go back to school, we'll be requesting around $44 million debt exclusion. The fire station looking at about 1/3 of that, about $15 million, and naturally that is much less. So it's more like in the area of in the fire station for a 20-year debt exclusion borrowing about $50 on that $1 million house.
Right.
But those numbers are still being worked on. But what we do want to do is, when it comes to town meeting floor, assuming there's a positive recommendation from the Finance Committee, is that there will be information available so that everybody who will be voting for or against will know exactly what the impact will be. And it won't be just be on $1 million house. It'll be a range for lower.
May I make a suggestion?
You can make it. I'm listening all the way. I always listen to you.
that whatever you give out has the effect as best estimated on current interest rates. But if interest rates go up 2%,
that's a good point.
Or 4%, what it's going to be, because
that's right, significant, absolutely.
It's very significant, and we are at a period of the lowest rates in memory of man.
That's true. And actually, just another, our bond rating just went up, which is also an advantageous time from the
borrowing standpoint.
Borrowing standpoint, and from the town getting its finances in order over the past 4 years, which again, that's a whole other interview we could do, as you know very well.
Yeah. So there are these
good.
capital projects which will have an impact. What about the operating budget? Are there any hot items in that you've come across so far?
The first answer is no. It's pretty much standard,
Steady state stuff.
steady state operated town. The revenues are good. The town is living within its means. I think town administration and the finance people have done an exemplary job with planning, with financial planning. And a good example is, and this is maybe diverting from the subject, is that the auditors, this town has notoriously had shaky, how shall I say, audits over the past few years, and that's not the case anymore. So I, for one, and as chairman, am confident in administration and the budget they're presenting. From the finance committee standpoint, the presentations that we've had so far have been very smooth. I mean, there's always a back and forth for example, why are you requesting additional personnel here, and why, and that the tenor of that can sometimes be a little aggressive or a little bit pragmatic. This year, it's the questions are asked, but the answers that are given are, well, gee, okay, this makes a lot of sense, especially in the light that there was a hiring freeze in the last economic downturn. And now things kind of got backed up, and so now trying to rectify, the administration's trying to rectify that by hiring additional personnel in public works, in police, in what do I kind of mind so far? I think probably in the airport. I think it's another area. So,
Plus.
And plus, yes,
Planning
which is still, and they're still finding their way from being a new department. From a budgetary standpoint, first year was a little bit shaky because those areas were coming in, and we weren't sure how things were going. This year, it's a lot better. It's a lot more consistent, and it doesn't seem to be those big dips, and it seems to be right on plan. So there's really no controversy. Maybe that's a better way of saying it.
The town has been very fortunate in having its base grow dramatically over the last 15 years or so. And so, in a sense, the Proposition 2.5 limitation on spending has enabled us to the growth in real estate values has enabled us to get away with some things that
That's true.
a lot of other towns haven't.
They can. That Prop 2.5 is, unless it's voted out every year, it's part of the budget.
Yeah, it's part of the budget, but because of our growth in the tax base, we get a fair amount of leniency, if
Yes,
you
we
will.
do.
And at some point, that's going to hit the wall. I suspect.
Well, I think it has. If you think back in the last, if I'm following your logic, in the last economic downturn, let's say 5 years ago, it did, and there was a hiring freeze, and things were cut, and it really was a difficult process for the finance committee and for the selectmen and for administration to get things in line, because of course you can't run a budget deficit from year to year, so which is a good thing. But when revenues went down, or there was a dip in certain parts, it was difficult to overcome. So I think we've done that, and now that things are a little bit rosier, is that this town is trying to provide the services that.
Obviously, we don't want to spend money where we don't have to, but
I agree.
There are some things where money should be spent that it hasn't been spent.
That's agreed. All agreed. Just deciding on if we're all in agreement on where it goes.
All right. But what about the question of the taxes generally here as opposed to other places? They're very low.
They are very low. I mean, I think we all have our stories. I can share my stories of living in northern New England, where the tax rate was, it was 5 times of what I'm paying. And I think also with this community, and it's okay to say this, is that we are blessed that, maybe blessed isn't the right word, but we're fortunate that 80% of the taxes that are paid are by individuals who are summer house.
Yeah, but we don't want to screw them either.
No, we don't. That's my point.
Yeah.
I agree. That's why, which is also important on when it gets back to capital improvements. Let's just talk about a fire station, for example, and the ramifications of a state-of-the-art, efficient center over what is there now benefits everybody. Voters and
Everybody.
taxpayers and
Right.
non-voters. In the school, I also can make the argument the same way. It benefits everyone, too.
What about, just the last question, what about
Sure.
the process of government that we have here? Is it getting too big and too complex for the present form of government?
Well, my opinion is my personal opinion. It's not a committee.
Understood.
Sarah, I do think that the way that, as you mentioned earlier, this community is growing, that there is the time has come to research a more efficient government, whether it be a representative,
town
thank you,
meeting.
town, or something along those lines. I mean, I don't know the answer, but it is difficult for selectmen, for committees, such as a finance committee. It's a lot of responsibility. I mean, the budget itself, $125 million that has to be discussed.
Overall, that's all, yeah.
Overall, yes, overall, and it does get difficult. So I think that maybe my answer is being political. I think the time has come for discussion to see if there is a better way. I personally believe that, because it can be difficult.
Good.
But.
Thank you, Matt Mulcahy, Chairman of the Finance Committee.
No,
It's
thank
great
you.
to have you.
It's a prayer. Thank you for having me, and thank you for your service too.